This is Gene Delisio with a featured sports program from WDLB and WOSQ. Walt Kroll served as head football coach at Columbus High School between 1964 and 1994, compiling a record of 219 wins, 99 losses, and 2 ties, earning 12 CWCC football championships and WISAA football championships in 1980, 1992, and 1994. In the spring of 1989, football fans from throughout central Wisconsin gathered at Columbus High School for a special program in Coach Kroll's honor.
Good afternoon and welcome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan Maurer, and I was a 1967-68 graduate for Coach Kroll. Before we get on with the program, there's some people you have to thank. And I'm just going to read them off so I don't forget anybody. First of all, we have to thank Jim Stearns and the Marshfield News-Herald for all the work and all the posters you see around here. Jim came along and got us all the information that we needed for 25 years. Gene Delisio, who did a lot of undercover work. I think he's back here taping it right now. He has to tape delay what these people are going to say for obvious reasons. Anyway, WDLB and Gene, we owe them a lot of thank yous, advertising, and a lot of footwork and a lot of telephone calls. The Times Review, we had to pay them big money to put that article in for you, Coach. I mean, we didn't raise enough either. Then the boys down at Heinsohn Printing for all the invitations that we sent out. Started a family feud down there. I asked one of the Heinsohn boys, okay, this is all I want. Came back another one. Then Jerry comes in at the last minute and changes everything anyway, so it didn't make any difference. So anyway, Jerry and the boys, thank you. Baltus Oil for the refreshments. They are donating the pop today. J.N. Weigel is donating the beer. The Barnyard, special thanks to them. They came up this morning, helped decorate the gym for us with all the balloons. Thanks. Finally, Danny Hughes. Danny was our finance coordinator, went around and made sure we had enough money to pay all the papers off, the radio stations, put a few balloons up. Anyway, Danny was around raising all the money. Next, Father Neis and the faculty. I don't think they've ever seen anything like me coming into this place. I walked in, told Father Neis what we were going to do, asked him what date it was going to be on. He told me. I talked to the art teacher. The art teacher says, okay, I'll do this for you. She was nice. I told her what she had to do for us. The athletic department, I needed some background information on Coach Kroll. They were more than happy to give it to me, by the way. Tom Zimmerman and the band, for obvious reasons. Special thanks to Amy Foltz for the singing of the Star Spangled Banner. She does a great job, doesn't she? And least of all, my wife, Kathy. She called the Times Review. She calls the radio station. I think her and Gene got something going on every time home. It's Gene Delisio, it's for Kathy. Oh, okay. Anyway, Kathy did a lot of work, and I want to thank her. Well, Coach, that's enough thank yous. Now it's your turn. When I first started hearing about somebody talking about, I want to make a 25th anniversary party for Coach Kroll, started hearing about all these nice things. Oh, he's a great guy, creator of men, making giants out of midgets. That's my favorite. When's the last time you saw somebody over 6 feet graduate from Columbus? The other thing I found real interesting, none of them were alumni. None of these people saying all this nice stuff played for Coach Kroll. So I thought, we got to get this nipped in the bud. The next thing I want to say is Coach, there's some statistics here I have to go over that they're not in any record book. And the only substantiation I had for these statistics is one night after one of our grade school football games, we had our debriefing party, strategy meeting, and we came up with some statistics that to be found nowhere. But Gar Greisinger has affirmed that these are correct. And if anybody knows, Gar would know. There's been 377 young men influenced by this man. I use the word influenced. Every time I talk to somebody that graduated in the 60s, starts a fight. You know what he did to me? I couldn't believe it. I started talking to guys that graduated in 77, 78. He's a nice guy. I said, who is this guy they're talking about? Seems that I think the reason Coach is a success is he has changed. If he treats kids like he treated us, and if you've ever been chewed out by Coach Kroll, I've only seen two guys that can chew out guys better than Coach Kroll. And not even Father Kelly. He's not as good as Coach Kroll. We used to scrimmage Appleton Xavier and Anigo every year. And then after that, the rest of the season was pretty easy. And Anigo had a guy named Gordy Schofield. Made Coach look nice. Then the guy down at Appleton, when Rocky Blyer was there, was a guy named Torchy Clark. Worse than Coach Kroll. The only two guys, though, that I know of. I have to wonder about the sanity of Coach Kroll. It's been kind of a concern of mine. 16,504 hours on the Dust Bowl out here on a practice field. Got to cause some kind of brain damage. I'm not. And that equates to hell's bells, Coach. 84,169 times I'm sure you said hell's bells. Of the 377 people that have been influenced by Coach Kroll, there's 96 people that think their first name is Jesus H. Jesus H, can't you cut it up? Jesus H, can't you run any faster than that? Jesus H, Tommy, the only running you did this summer was to the pizza parlor and back. That's, 119,431 times Jesus H. That's just on the football field. Comes to the point of when Coach Kroll was in a hospital. Not serious. I went to great lengths. I went up and visited him even. Find out what was wrong with Coach Kroll. Nobody seemed to know. So I talked to a few doctors. Of course, they wouldn't tell me anything. Called up Dr. Haight and Dr. Ruppel out of retirement. They didn't know. They've been golfing or something. So finally called a few alumni. They did their influencing, trying to find out what was going on. Well, Coach, anybody that ever broke an arm, broke a leg, came off the field hobbling, knows what was wrong with you. It was all in your head. True story, broke both hands in a McDonald game, come off in the third quarter, and he said, oh, just get back in, there's nothing wrong with you, it's all in your head. I couldn't move my hands. So he calls a running play, and I'm supposed to carry the ball. Now comes to the best part. You can thank Kathy and Gene Delisio for this letter, Coach. We managed to track down your coaches from Glenwood City, a Mr. Elling Slottom the assistant basketball coach from your senior year, he managed to come up with a few memories. He admitted that you were a darn good basketball player. You pay him? And you were on a winning team. He also mentioned a favorite nickname. Back then, Walt Kroll was better coach, known by the name of Coach. He not always was named Coach. Classmates called him Skog. Is there a story here, Coach?
No.
No, okay. The other little bit of information we got out of his annual, his yearbook for that year, Skog will become a principal of a high school. That was the first sentence. The reason why he was going to become a principal of a high school, he spent so much time in the office. Mr. Slocum does want to express his congratulations today and best wishes for your continued success. When I was putting this program together, it was real easy. I just did exactly what I wanted to do. I asked these gentlemen, looks like the post office line, doesn't it? Something you see on the wall. Anyway, I asked all these gentlemen, and they were more than happy to come and speak when I told them it was going to be a roast. When it came time to who was going to MC the program, there seemed to be no question about it. A lot of alumni called me, and a lot of people said, well, you did ask Ron. Boy, I was lucky I asked Ron. Ron Aslakson is a teacher at senior high. He's one of Coach Kroll's partners in crime, no doubt. And he is a real good friend of everybody in the city of Marshfield. So, Ron, it's your program.
Thanks, Dan. Jim Stern, this is the first and last time you will ever be publicly thanked. Who in the world audited those numbers for GAR? You did, okay? You can't count past 50 GAR, remember? As you can see by my sweater, this day is about football. Wisconsin runs that offense called, I think it's called the near, no, it's the veer where you go sideways and pretty soon you got a U-turn going. And of course, Coach went to Minnesota, that's another reason why I wore it. This is about football. I looked for the definition that is the best one I could find, and here it is. Football, a sport that bears the same relation to education that bullfighting does to agriculture. And we like the violence. That's maybe too strong a word. We like the action, we like the hitting, and I found this one too. If the players were armed with guns, there wouldn't be stadiums large enough to hold the crowds. The men on my left here are all experienced individuals with football. They know how things go up and down, and quotes like, one day you're drinking the wine, the next day you're stomping them. When you're 7-3, the fans talk about 7 wins. When you're 9-1, they talk about the one that you lost. Most of you people out in the audience today are safe from any slams from me. These people are not. Although a couple of them might be, because I was rather cruel to the mayor one time, and I may have to apologize for that. Or I might wait and do it later. I also want you to understand that the only other reason Jim Stern is here is there is beer here this afternoon. We were a little worried Tom Knauf couldn't make it today because it was rumored he was going to be in the hospital undergoing some knee surgery. The truth is the knee surgery will be postponed until later on, and there's also a chance for some hair transplants to take place as well. Today is also his wife's birthday, and he's going to take her out to celebrate. This is it, kid. This is it. A beer at Columbus High School on your birthday. Tom matured pretty early in life, folks. When he was promoted from the 5th to the 6th grade, he was so thrilled he could hardly shave without cutting himself. And we don't have to worry about success going to Tom's head, because if it did, it'd be a short visit anyway. Tom once told his offensive lineman that if the meek are going to inherit the earth, you guys are going to be land barons. And then one more about just not Tom necessarily, but coaches in general. I'm sure these guys spend an awful lot of time. Coaches spend 18 hours a day coaching the perfect game, and then they lose because the ball is oval and they can't control the bounces. This guy has had more than his share of success. He played here under Coach Kroll. He's now the head football coach at Stratford. We'd like to invite him up here right now, Mr. Tom Knauf.
Look on that program. It was handed out. My middle name is Jesus, by the way. I don't know how many times. I think I was part of that 89,261. I think I was probably 80,000 of those. I want to thank Ron for that kind introduction. I heard, Ron, your golf game was improving. Instead of hitting a hole in one, you finally hit the ball in one. I've often had people come up to me and ask me why Stratford doesn't play Columbus in football, considering we're only 10 miles apart, school sizes are about the same. My usual comment to them is to ask them when their next doctor's appointment is. Public school teams know they're in trouble right from the start when the Columbus offense comes to the line of scrimmage and starts out their cadence with "Our Father." And instead of drinking Gatorade on the sideline, they replenish their systems with holy water. Rumor had it, or has it, that Coach Kroll would move on and coach the Green Bay Packers. But he said no to the job. He wanted to stay at Columbus because the intelligence level here is higher. Not much is known about Coach's early years when he was first playing football in Glenwood City. But at his first day of football practice, his innovative style and ingenuity were apparent. You see, he showed up at practice with his jock strap wrapped around his head. He thought it was a nose guard. Life had always been tough on him. While he was growing up, he couldn't get a girlfriend. Finally, one evening, the neighbor girl called and whispered over the phone, "There's nobody home. Come on over." She was right. When he got there, nobody was home. After high school, he attended the University of Minnesota, where he graduated in amazingly just 2 terms.
Trumans, and Eisenhowers. His answers to history questions, and of course he was a history teacher, like name the two famous brothers who made it possible for us to fly. He wrote on his paper, Ernest and Julio Gallo. He definitely made an impression on his professors and his peers. In his coaching at Owen Withy, it was noted that on a certain occasion he had to help out one of his big tackles with his math class. Apparently, apparently the young man was going to flunk the class, and so Coach set up a meeting between the teacher himself and the young man. At this meeting, it was agreed upon that if the young man would answer just one question correctly, he would pass the class. The math teacher asked him the question, "What is the sum of 4 plus 4? The young athlete, after careful deliberation, said 9. Coach immediately jumped to his feet to defend the young man, saying, "Gee, he only missed it by 3. I remember well Coach Kroll's U.S. history class, his first year at Columbus, my junior year. He managed to cover not only U.S. history, but also the day's current events, like the everyday common porcupine has 36,000 quills. Bet you didn't know that, did you? No wonder he makes love carefully. His test always contained bonus points, which of course the girls rarely answered correctly and would really get mad about. Questions like, who did Joe Namath play for? How many points for a touchdown? Who were the running backs on the Green Bay Packers' first Super Bowl team? But he did have sound advice for them. He told them to marry an archaeologist. He said, so the older you get, the more your husband will appreciate you. In order to become a more knowledgeable coach, he would take trips in the spring to certain colleges to watch spring practice. On a plane trip back from Southern California, a pretty red-headed young woman sat in the plane seat next to him. Being the conversationalist that he is, he soon struck up a conversation with the young lady. He said that he was a football coach from Marshfield and that he had been out to Southern Cal and had watched spring practice, and the information that he had gotten would be useful in helping him prepare for the upcoming season. She stated that she had been attending a convention and that at this convention it was noted that Indians and Irishmen make the best lovers. Finishing the statement, she asked, by the way, we've been talking here for some time and I don't even know your name. Without hesitating a second, Coach said, Tonto O'Kroll. We all know that Coach has been visiting the doctor in the past few years. The doctor gave him some sound advice and advised him to give up smoking, drinking, and chasing women. It was the worst 20 minutes of his life. He has now reached the age where happy hour is a nap, and his favorite rock group is Mount Rushmore. In recent years, Coach has been heard talking to himself in the hallways. When questioned about this, he said he picks up a lot of useful information that way. Coach is very optimistic about life. Says he plans on getting married when he's 85 to a 25-year-old young lady and buy a 5-bedroom house near school. Well, that's optimism. On a serious note, the highest compliment that I can pay Coach Kroll would be for him to coach my sons. For in his hand I would put my most prized possessions. I want him to instill in those young men what he has instilled in me. I call them the 3 Ds, their desire, discipline, and dedication. Without these traits and the things that he has passed on to me, directly and indirectly, I would not be as successful as I am today. Once again, thank you, Coach, because you truly are a great coach, a legend in your time. Thank you.
Well, he won't have to work on Tom's lip at the hospital. That's pretty good shape. The question of the day is, folks, is there anywhere in the United States where there is not a Soderberg coaching? Don's at Pacelli, and Jeff's at Columbus, and Brad is in Dubuque, and Pat's in Thorpe. Pat's still coaching at the coffee, aren't you, Pat? Yeah, that's him. Don Soderberg has been in the private business for a few years now. He doesn't belong as the part of the faculty at Pacelli anymore, but he still coaches, and a lot of people feel the same way about coaching, his coaching ability as I do, Don, and it's over. You should probably think about giving it up. Talking about being tough with kids, Don's pretty good at halftime talks. He once walked into the locker room at halftime and said, "Oh, excuse me, girls, I thought this was the Pacelli locker room," and he walked out, and they won the game as it turned out. Some more quotes from football, because this is a football afternoon. You're not sure if I made these up. You're not sure if they're famous people. I'm not going to tell you. But talk about being tough on officials. Abe Lemons, whom you've all heard of, I'm sure, before, said you can talk to popes, you can talk to kings, you can talk to presidents, but you can't talk to officials. In the next war, they ought to give everybody a whistle. Don has been a basketball coach and a football coach. He said he prefers coaching football because he once lost 10 games in a whole month in basketball, and that was too many. You can only lose 10 in the season in football. And he also received once upon a time a letter that just simply said, "Donald the Dope." And he didn't really care that some sports fan got disturbed and wrote him a letter. That's the privilege of all sports fans. But he still wonders why the postman knew why it should be delivered to his house. A former Columbus coach, a colleague of Coach Kroll, a good friend of mine, and now still assistant coach at Pacelli, Don Soderberg.
Thank you. I can't help but express what a joy it is to come here today and see some of you people that played football and basketball back when I was here, and that was from 66 to 71. I noticed the Tim Fehrenbachs and Bill and Tom Seidel and Bobby Cook and Paul Mansell. You have lost a little hair. And then at the same time, I see Bob Rose out here and Ed Smirsick, full heads of hair. Coach, I don't know. Maybe you didn't use those words with those two guys like you did with some of those others. I don't know. I also am pleased to see here, and I know that I haven't looked through the whole crowd, but Lee Gilbert from Aquinas is here, and Jerry Yucatel, who was at McDonell, at now at Hudson. I see Terry Allen from Eau Claire Regis here, Russ Grundy from Wausau Newman. I think that says something, Coach. I think that's great that these people take the time to get over here and also participate in a program like this. I'm going to get back to you in a minute here, Coach, but I just would be remiss if I didn't respond to Mr. Aslakson here. As many of you know, he is called A, and that may have come from you too, Walt, I'm not sure. But it just so happens Ron and I are both the same age, and and I got to know Ron back in the middle 60s when I came here in 65, and I just wanted to, I continue hearing about Ron Aslakson being MC here in Marshfield. I was just thinking about some of the things that Ron has done. He has already been mentioned as a teacher at senior high for many years. He gets switched around quite often in different classes, two different teaching areas. Maybe only teachers understand why that takes place. I noticed he ran the golf shop out here at River Edge for a couple of years and failed miserably at that. Would you agree with that, Vern? Failed miserably. He coached the varsity basketball team at senior high. Maybe some of you remember that. That was something else too. I know now every once in a while I catch him on the radio trying to do color and radio broadcasting. I know that he takes groups of people on golf trips during the summer and he refers to them as his A team and his B team. Now, folks, we're talking about a 49-year-old adult who's doing these things. He leads an entourage to Madison every year to the state basketball tournament, of which he has never seen a game. Okay. And I noticed that recently he has been put in charge of running the football pools at the Elks Club. So you see, you've got a person here today that is a highly responsible person that lives in Marshfield. And by the way, I think to this day, Ron, that his mother still shovels the sidewalk all the time. You know, I think that I really don't understand why they would choose you. I mean, you know, they've got Paul Rozak here. Certainly, Paul Rozak could be the MC here. He does a great job emceeing all football games. All of you opposing coaches, would you agree? He does an outstanding job at how about Pete Mansell? Pete Mansell would be an excellent MC. He says everything that's on his mind at all times. Or Spike Schweikel. At least Spike looks the part, Ron. He looks the part. Those, you know, Marshfield has Thursday golf, and of course Thursday night is golf course night. And Walt, how many times on Friday mornings haven't you called senior high to get Mr. Aslakson? And of course he's not there, right? He's not there. He had called in sick. He called in sick after his sinus problems. Yes, sinus problems. Right. See, I think it's important for us in Marshfield to realize that Mr. Aslakson does have some responsibilities, and I think it would only be fair to the school system here in Marshfield that on Friday morning, starting about 6:30, that some of you friends of his start calling. The phone number is 384-5605. 5605. That's Ron's phone number. Give him a hand. I think that would be well for him, so that you taxpayers are paying for a full 5 days of teaching by Mr. Aslakson. Father Kelly, way down in the end. Father Kelly was the principal at Columbus High School when I was hired here, when Walt was hired here. I remember asking Father, why did you hire Walt Kroll? And he said, any man that comes in here applying for a job that wears wingtips, he's got it. You remember saying that, Father? Huh? You betcha. Who would have guessed in the 60s that we would, in 1988, be here at Columbus paying homage to the King, huh, Father? Yeah, got it. God, it's great to be with these people up here. I see Duane Teska down there, and of course, Duane, again, those of you that have been close with Walt know how close, of course, Duane and Walt are, and I think that Teska is as much of a legend in Colby as Walt is here at Columbus. Sometimes it's quite questionable in what way you're a legend, Teska, but I will let you talk about that yourself. They've been longtime travelers together, and I see it's really difficult, except from a football standpoint, to roast Coach Kroll. See, he doesn't golf, he doesn't bowl, and he never did, except one time I remember he did. And this was back in the 60s when we used to go to football clinics. Remember that, Tess? And the two of you had gone over to the River Falls football clinic. Now, see, a lot of times at football clinics they have golf tournaments in conjunction with the clinic. True story. Now, this stuff I tell is true, okay? Not like some of these guys. Anyway, so these two guys get part of a foursome, and they're out golfing, and it's a tournament for a trophy, okay? And you know, Teska is a pretty good golfer. And I was going to say something else, Tess, but I won't at this point. He came over here and won a tournament this year with a 30 handicap, which is beyond what I can comprehend. But anyway, in River Falls, he was at the golf tournament. They were out golfing. It was a hot day. And after 16 holes, now get this now, you got 16 holes, he and Walt decide to leave their foursome because they're thirsty and it's hot and they want to get off the course. So anyway, later on, the two guys that they were golfing in, they come in and the cards turn in, and then pretty soon there's a bunch of people coming up, shaking hands with Tess, nice round Tess, good job golfing. Later that night, you know, thinks nothing of it. Later that night, they give out the first place prize, and they call Duane Teska. Duane Teska, with a score of 69, is the golf winner for this tournament. And of course, Walt, you know, not to let on like they only played 16 holes, he's standing up, giving a hand, Tess goes up and gets the trophy. Now, Duane, is that a true story? Well, for 16 holes, or maybe 8 holes. Speaking of Duane, folks, back in 23 years ago, that would be the first Super Bowl, is that correct? 23 years ago? We had a first Super Bowl get together at Mr. Kroll's house. Remember that, Tess? Tess, do you remember that? Anyway, you know, that was a time when the Packers were super, and I mean, things were going good. And as a matter of fact, do you remember my father was there for that too, Walt? Remember? Right. Matter of fact, they're here today. Two your best friends, my mother and father. Hey, stand up back there once, and you know, let Walt know you're here, okay? Very quickly, when Tess was headed home, he lived in Colby. None of his athletes are here today, Tess. So when he was living in Colby, by God, he took a wrong turn and went through Stratford on his way to Colby. The Packers won that Super Bowl, and I'll tell you, we had a good time that day, Walt. Rather than roast, I'd like to just have some of you people remember some of these things. I remember my first year coming here to Columbus, and Father Kelly was here, and I remember the faculty meeting in the fall. Now, do you still have Mass like the Friday before the game and stuff like that? Well, see, I remember in the faculty meeting, Coach Kroll, non-Catholic, you still are, aren't you? I mean, standing up, trying to convince the faculty members, the nuns and the priests, that it would be well to have Mass on Friday morning before a football game. Now see, you've got to imagine that, people. Here is Walt, and he's got to convince the people to have a Mass, okay? How about Walt, do you remember when Willie Wilcott got hit in the head with a 16-pound shot? Do you remember that? Now, I think I see Willie. It's been a long time, Willie, and maybe you remember that. Willie had thrown the shot, folks, went over to retrieve it, and I don't know who the next thrower was, but he nailed him right on the head. And and he stumbled over and sat down on a, maybe Ed, maybe some of you guys remember, sat down on the step over there, and by God, I'll tell you, it was a few minutes later, he was back up, and most normal people would have killed him, I'm telling you. I'll tell you something, maybe you remember this, Tom. Walt used to be very active on the bench, folks, and used to go out get on the football field, okay? Now today, the officials, they've got you back 3 yards, 5 yards, and all that kind of stuff. But Walt was very active. He'd go out on a football field. True story. Tom Seidel's coming around in, okay? Walt is on the field a good 10 yards. Seidel runs between Walt and the sidelines and goes for a touchdown. Now, if you don't believe me, they've got the films that show that. That's a true story. I've never seen it in my life. The official didn't see it. I assume he didn't see it. You talked about the Dust Bowl. Is the Dust Bowl still Dust Bowl? Is it? You never did get that place fixed, huh? Walt, do you remember Bob Rose? And we were, people, if you don't understand the Dust Bowl, you don't know what we're talking about right now. And I mean, it's so dusty that you can't hardly stand it, okay? I'm surprised you haven't been taking a court on that thing yet. But anyway, Bob is coming back, and boy, we're having a tough practice, and Walt is raising hell with everybody, and even the assistant coaches. And anyway, Bob is going, don't you guys care? He's trying to knock all the dust out. It's just unbelievable out there. You remember that? Remember that, Coach? How about this one now, Coach? Now, don't take this wrong, folks. We had an assistant coach here, a basketball coach by the name of Jim Hebel. I don't know where Jim Hebel is. After he left Columbus, I never heard of him again. But anyway, he wanted to do something for the people at the Norwood Health Facility. And so he invited 60 of them to come here to a basketball game. Spike, you remember that, don't you? How can you forget? Anyway, interestingly enough, it happened to be a basketball game against Pacelli. Now, at that time, sparse crowds were quite regular, okay? And so they were all sitting across from the benches over there, and of course, Walt has got his signs out there, no smoking, no pop, and all that kind of stuff. Well, the problem was not the health patients, the problem was the supervisors, see, with smoking in the bleachers. But the funniest part of the whole story is, at halftime, they had to go to the restroom. Now, I don't know who it was that directed them, but Nubs Miller, who was at Pacelli at the time, to this day remembers those people coming down into the locker room to go to the restroom. Unbelievable, unbelievable. How about Rue Burnett? Does Rue still drive the bus? Yeah. Rue Burnett. How many of you players out here had to stand up in the front to help keep Rue awake? Huh? True story? Up and down the Mississippi River to Campion? Boy, I'll tell you what, those were some trips. How about the nicknames? The nicknames that you picked up from Coach, huh? I just thinking, how about Eddie Bear, Elmo, Freddie Bear, Zelmo, Spiegel, Hazy, Buster, Hobo, I don't know, Dick and Bob. Remember the twins? The twins? You know, who's who? By the way, Walt, I just had an announcement when I was coming in just before I got this. I was supposed to apologize. just before the program started, I was handed this note. At 1:55 this afternoon, someone noticed the mobile home of Walt Kroll was burning. Before the fire department was able to respond, it had burned quickly to the ground. No one was in the home, and the damage report was nothing was lost. The damage value for insurance purposes was zero. Coach, I don't know. And as the reporter was leaving, and this is a note that someone gave me, he noticed several neighbors throwing what appeared to be gasoline and wood on the small. Coach, I'm all finished. Two things I noticed recently that tells me you are in fact re-entering your second childhood. It has come to my attention through my son that you have consented to once again be the freshman basketball coach. Secondly, I saw a videotape a while back of your '88 homecoming celebration. I saw you in a skit up front here with three of your illustrious coaches over here, apparently the leader of the Fat Boys. That was fine, but when I kept seeing and hearing you going, is that true? True. I too, like Tom, in closing, would certainly like to let and I'm sure that you people at Columbus know that you have a man here who literally has earned the respect of the coaches and athletic directors throughout the state, who certainly is the leader in the development of the reputation of the CWCC football, and who's really given class to the group of CWCC athletic directors. Since 1963, think about it, how many principals have gone through Pacelli? How many assistant coaches has he worked with? How many teachers have worked with him? How many students have looked to him for an example? How many players now, in the same way, use what the coach taught them? And I think the common denominator that we all agree has been Walt Kroll. Finally, Coach Kroll, he's shown young men that there are ways to measure speed, ways to measure strength, ways to measure height and weight, but there's been nothing devised, and I note this more at Columbus than any place else, nothing devised to measure the size of the heart in a man. And that's why there's that great success here. Coach, you've taught and touched all of us. Congratulations. Thank you.
Behind the thing here before, I went to get the Packer score. I should have stayed back there, and this man just took me apart. He wants Rozak. We'd be here till 10 o'clock tonight, folks. He has his mother and dad stand. The whole family would have stood. Now, my God. Thursday golf. Golf is played in the summer. There's no school. See, it's really Tuesday night bowling. I brought my mother, but she's home chipping ice off the driveway again. What can a person say about Duane Teska? He did win a golf tournament at River Edge this summer with Duke Poppy. His handicap was higher than the IQ of the 2 starting running backs for Green Bay. He once told me college was the best 7 years of his life. He almost didn't get here because he had a near accident last week. A thought nearly struck him. And I hope he does clarify that River Falls clinic story, because I think Don was pretty accurate. And when Duane comes up here, I'm going back behind the curtain, because I want you to understand something, folks. With 10 minutes to go, Green Bay was leading Minnesota 16-6. So I got to find out what's going on. Here comes the Colby Hornet, Duane Teska.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Such a warm welcome for myself. I was admiring Mr. Soderberg's sport jacket on the way down. Seems ironic. There's a 48 DeSoto out there that don't have any seat covers anymore. And I can tell by that Mr. A is having girl trouble again, the way he's talking up here. In fact, he confided in me before the show, said since he got his new car, he said his girlfriend always wants to go in the back seat and fool around. I said, what's the matter with that, A? He said, yeah, but she wants me to drive. Well, I met Walt a long time ago, and I was playing baseball at Ellsworth, close to River Falls, where I went to school, and there was some of my teammates were from Glenwood, and then I got to know him just a little bit there, and then I was graduating, and lo and behold, I got a job at Owen Withy, and I hadn't seen Walt all summer, or for the last month anyway, and I said I was thrilled at the opportunity to begin my education career at Owen Withy. So I pulled up the first day for in-service, and here come another guy, pulled in right alongside of me. I looked over there, and doggone, it wasn't Walt. And I had seen him for a long time, and then we got to be good friends, and we ended up staying together. And he introduced me, and he said, you got to coach the freshmen. So the freshman was part of the varsity program, so I got introduced into football there. And I remember first game we had to go to a place up at Cornell and played a game up there, and the kind of a ragged, both teams weren't playing very well in the first half, and so we went in at the half, and there's a partition that separates where both teams go in for the half, and it's a partition. One team goes in and you're very quiet, you can hear what the other people are saying. So as I said, neither team is doing very good, so we got in there second, and the team on the other side, the coach was he was really going over the players. It's a true story. So saying, well, you guys aren't blocking, and somebody's got to be rushing that passer, and there's nobody out there that has any leadership and going through the whole thing. And it took a long time for him to deliver, and our kids were just sitting there like this, looking up and waiting, and we were supposed to get some instructions too. But this guy shouting on the other side, we couldn't hear anything, but it kind of fit both ways because nobody was playing very good. So pretty soon the referee sticks in his head and he said, all right, 3 minutes, we got to go. So the kids got up and looked around, and Walt looked at him and he said, all right, you heard what that guy on the other side said. The same goes for me. So then I had basketball. He said, okay, you got to have 7th and 8th grade basketball. Well, I had a little guy there, I remember his name was Petey. And at the facility that we had at Withy, we didn't have shower facilities. And Petey wasn't showering at home either. It was developing quite an odor there. So I asked Walt, I said, what should I do? I said, the kid really smells. He said, why don't you write a note home, and tell the parents about it and be tactful about it. So I sent a note home that Petey, probably with some personal hygiene, should have been taken care of, and that there was an odor that was around him, and suggested strongly that you take care of it at home. It was their responsibility too. So next day I got a note back. It says, Coach, Petey ain't no rose, coach him, don't smell him. Thank you.
Did he clarify that story? We'll get to the bottom of it. We probably should have had Bob Stevenson up here sooner because he generally likes to stand up so he can give his brain a rest. Norm Van Brocklin, the late Norm Van Brocklin, who was a real tough official baiter once, or not official baiter, but sports writer baiter, said this: if I ever needed a brain transplant, and you probably have all heard this, I'd choose a sports writer because I'd want a brain that had never been used. And Bob has epitomized that throughout his entire career. This one fits all writers, and I've said this before in public. I think I said it about Stern. I'm glad he's here too, but it probably fits Bob too. All sports writers ever do is come down from the hills after the battle is over and shoot the wounded. Former sports editor of the Marshfield News-Herald, Mr. Bob Stevenson.
I don't know, I didn't come here to roast today. I came here to reminisce a little bit, but any jokes I might have already been told. Everyone I was going to tell, these guys have already told. But I do remember playing golf with Ron once this summer. Ron was on the other team. Ed Sheehan was his partner, and Jerry Fish was my partner. And I don't know if you know the first hole out of River Edge. You go across the water, and there's some trees over on the right-hand side. And Ron hit his drive out in that neck of the woods, and we went out there. He couldn't find it. There are a lot of dandelions and things out there. And finally, we were playing for some pretty good money that day, and we looked for about 5 or 10 minutes. We couldn't find his ball, so we said, well, we'll see at the green. And he hung around for a little while. We all got up on the green, and all of a sudden Ron was way back. I found my ball, he said. I found my ball. And Jerry Fish and I knew darn well he couldn't have had it because we had it in our back pocket. When they asked me to speak at this thing, I didn't know what I was going to talk about, and I thought maybe I'd just reminisce a little bit. It's been 25 years since Walt's been here, and there have been a lot of memorable football games played by Columbus. 4 or 5 of them stand out. I didn't even have to go back in the files to look up some of them, although I did just to check on some of the facts. And the one that I remember more than any other one happened October 12, 1968 at Whitterfield in Wisconsin Rapids. At that time, Assumption was more or less a power. Stevens Point Pacelli hadn't come along. I don't think Aquinas was in the league yet. So Assumption was a power, so naturally Walt made them our arch rival. When Aquinas became strong later on a few years, then Aquinas was our arch rival. And later on, now it's Pacelli that you have to go through to win a championship other than Columbus. So now Pacelli's our arch rival. But in those days, it was Assumption. And 1968, it came 3 years after that 1965 game that Columbus lost out here in the rainstorm, and I always remember it for a specific reason. Columbus had a great day that day. They beat Assumption 52-14. They rolled up 505 yards to 81. Some of the fellows on that team were Kurt Koenig, Dave Drock, Bill Draxler, Jeff Rasmussen. And as we walked off the field, I used to ride on the bus down there in those days. And we walked over there, and as we walked, most of the fans had already left the field, and we were walking over towards the bus. I was walking with Walt. And we got to not many people around, and all of a sudden there stood Greg Thibodeau, who's had a long line of athletic heroes at Assumption, and he was a big alumni backer down there and a great Royal fan. And Walt never broke stride. He just kept walking. Then he looked over at Greg Thibodeau and he says, "What do you think of that, Thib?" He kept right on walking, you know. And I really love that because I'd gone to school with Greg Thibodeau way back when, and there's a kind of a rivalry there too with us. And I think one of the reasons Walt gave him that little dig was in retaliation for that 1965 game. The only game Columbus lost all year out here in the rainstorm. One of Columbus's greatest teams, and I went back and looked up some of that game, and it surprised me. Columbus fumbled the ball 15 times in that game. They fumbled it about 8 times, but at any rate, Columbus lost the ball game. And you can always say what might have been had it not rained, but I thought at the time it rained just as hard on Assumption as it did on Columbus that night, and on that particular night I thought they were a better ball team. But on that team was Bobby Koch, who you all know is one of Columbus's all-time greats. And Walt had told me earlier, a year or two earlier, in a game when they were playing Oshkosh Lords down in Oshkosh, that he had a real promising young halfback on the team, but he didn't want the kid to get cocky. You know, so one time in scrimmage, they kicked off to Bobby, and he wove through that, took the ball on about the 5-yard line, wove 95 yards, dodging guys and giving them stiff arms and everything else, you know. And Walt said to turn to one of his assistant coaches, and he said, "Geez, that guy's going to be a heck of a back," but he says, I don't want him to go to his head. He says, "I think I'll have a little talk with him." So he called Bobby over, and he said, "Bobby," he said, "I want to tell you, when you went over that way," he says, "you should have gone a little more out to the outside, and you should have used your left hand. You should have changed hands of the ball. And then when you got up to the 40, he said, you didn't set up your blocker out there. And then along about 30, you looked like you slowed up a little bit. Now, you got that straight, Bobby?" And Bobby said, "Yeah," and Bobby turned away and started to walk away, and then he turned around and said, "Oh, by the way, Coach, how was that run for distance?" he says. And then there was a famous game turned out on September 5th, 1965. First game of the year. It was on a Sunday afternoon. They were playing St. Paul Cretin. And these are just some of the more memorable games that I remember. And the headline in the paper the day before said that Columbus was going to play St. Paul Cretin, Wausau of the state of Minnesota. They were the defending state champions in Minnesota and supposed to have another powerhouse. Well, in that game, I forget what the score was. Well, it was 56 to something, 56 to 12 or something like that. And Bobby Koch had the day of his life. He had 292 yards and 19 carries. He had a 73-yard touchdown run called back. And he scored 6 touchdowns, and later on that year he became National High School Catholic Back of the Year. Then there was one other game I recall. Walt's not going to like this one very much. Happened only 5 years ago, yeah, and it was against Edgewood out here. And Walt and I have had our differences over the year. Trying to get an answer out of Walt sometime can be trying. And it happened on this particular instance. They were playing Edgewood again in the first game of the year. Scoreless tie, late in the first half. And Columbus got the ball down to the 5-yard line with 24 seconds left to play. Jack Sepek from Wisconsin Rapids was refereeing, and he signals the clock to start. And the clock starts. Columbus had 2 timeouts left at the time, and to make a long story short, they ran 2 running plays, never called a timeout, never got to kick a field goal. And the game ended 3-3. And then in the overtime, Columbus kicked a field goal, and they lost the game 6-3. But had they kicked a field goal on the last play of the first half, the game never would have got to overtime. So I couldn't wait to see Kroll after the game, and I said, Walt, how come you didn't call a timeout down there? He said, well, he was a little nonplussed there. He didn't know what to say right away. And he said, well, we thought we could get 2 running plays in those final 24 seconds. And I still want to know, Walt, why you didn't call a timeout in that. Interviewing him after a game was really a tough job. I had a little more time after a Columbus game because the games were usually played on Saturday night, and I had all day Sunday to write up the story, and I usually went over to Walt's house on Sunday night and would sit around, and I'd try to get something out of there I could just insert into the story, And I'd sit there and I'd pump some, well, what do you think about this now? Why did you do that, or why did you do this? And he'd come through with a lot of good answers. I said, geez, I'm getting some good quotes here tonight. And I said, but don't put that in the paper, he says, And then before I figured I'd finally work around, get some more, and then I'd figure I'd have enough for a story, And just before I'd get up to go, he'd say, now what do you got down there? And so I'd have to read him all the stuff I had down there, and I'd get his approval to put it in the paper, all the time. So, of course, there were a lot of other things, too, I remember about little things that come to mind. Riding the bus, how well behaved the kids always were. And I've been on a lot of bus rides, after the kids got beat bad and they'd come home, they'd be celebrating like they think they won the ball game. It never happened on the Columbus bus. I had a daughter who was a cheerleader at the senior high school, and she, at a Columbus homecoming one time, they invited the senior high cheerleaders come to their homecoming rally out here, and every single one of those girls couldn't believe the enthusiasm and the pep that they had here at the Columbus cheerleading, and I think that goes back a little bit to Walt, too. And there is 100-mile cigars, If you ever go in a car, if you ever want to go to Madison with Walt, make sure he takes his car, because if you don't, your car is going to smell like a cigar factory out I come on. And there's so many things about the Columbus program, too. Enrollment-wise, Columbus is small by comparison, But if you look up the records, they got more all-conference players than any school in the history of the Central Wisconsin Catholic Conference. And his penchant for playing bigger opponents, I think that's another thing that has led to Columbus's successful football program. It's a great philosophy. You never get great playing teams worse than you are. Also, while I was thinking about this, I thought, well, maybe I could get a couple of quotes from some friends of Walt. So I did write, and I got this letter from Steve Pavella. Dear Walt, it was with mixed emotions that I received the invitation to your 25th anniversary as teacher and coach at Columbus. Exceptionally happy because you are being most deservedly recognized for the sterling contributions you have made not only to so many at the home of the Dons during this period, but as well to the Marshfield community, the state, and beyond. Sad because I am unable to share this day of tribute with you due to our prior commitment. During the years I was privileged to serve with WISAA, I had the honor of associating with many truly magnanimous people, both inside and outside the sports world. but none made a more lasting impression on me than you, Walt. You are not only a coach beyond compare, but also a man of the highest integrity, greatly admired and deeply respected by all who have had the good fortune of being the recipient of your inspiring ways. I am personally pleased and honored to be among them. Marion joins me in asking God's blessing on you, not only for who you are, but for what you are, as we extend our warm congratulations on this happy occasion to a very special person, Walt Kroll. Cordially, Steve and Marion Pavella. And then there's a P.S., Walt, and he said I should mention this to you. It says, "Go Irish, beat West Virginia." He says that'll have some significance to you. The other one says, "Coach Walt Kroll, congratulations on your 25th year of coaching. I have met a lot of coaches and talked to many in my 38 years in the sporting goods business. There were many good ones and some not so good, but you were one of the best. I have watched you coach and how you handle the players. There were times when you did get mad, like many coaches. You are not a very good coach unless you get mad at times. I consider you and Mike Farley, coach at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, the best coaches in football in Wisconsin. You have done wonders with the players you have had to work with. I wonder what you would have done with the horses some of the other schools have. Walt, I have always enjoyed our friendship, the great times, the 100-miler cigars. I have always looked in the fall at the sports pages to see how the Columbus High School Dons have come out. You are a great guy and coach. Please always stay that way. There are not many coaches that are honored Coach of the Year like you. Good luck, Walt, and I will always pull for you. Your pal, Johnny Cox." And I did want to come up with one joke. So about 6 weeks ago, I wrote Lou Holtz a letter at Notre Dame and asked him just one football coach joke. And that was 6 weeks ago. I know the Irish still had 2 games to play, and I was pulling for him to go undefeated. I said, let's return that national championship to the Middle West. And knowing Lou Holtz, having seen him on Johnny Carson, and I know he's considered a wit, and I had hoped he'd return the answer, but by Friday I hadn't had an answer. But yesterday it arrived, and here's Lou Holtz's joke. He tells about the coach, Walt, who was telling his player at a squad meeting how they all knew that complete commitment was demanded of them. And he went on to say that he detected that there seemed to be some question among some of his players as just to what the difference was between involvement and commitment. And as he was looking around for an example to use to his football players, he thought of eating breakfast that morning. He said, "I was eating my bacon and eggs this morning." He said, "The chicken, she was involved," he said, "but that pig, he was committed." Now, Walt, everybody here knows how dedicated you've been and how committed you are, and totally committed and everything else. And I just hope that you stay that way and stay here at Columbus as long as you like, because you're a great coach, and I like having you here.
Thanks, Steve. Bob said he was going to speak about 2 minutes today. And that night of that Edgewood game with those 2 running plays, I was running the clock, so Walt thought I'd slow it down a little. I always ran the clock. Hey, be there. Don't stab me in the back. I'll be there, Coach. Father Dan Kelly was
principal of this school when not all the faculty had all their faculties. And I'll tell you what, I'd rather listen to a bad minister talk than a good football coach anytime. And I know Father Kelly's now down at the federal prison in Oxford. I'm not sure in what capacity. Are his shackles off? The principal for many, many years here at Columbus High School, Father Dan Kelly.
I got permission from George Bush to have an unescorted furlough for the day. You like that one, Coach? Walt, no wingtip floor shines. When Walt unfolded himself out of a little red Falcon that he had driven up from Milwaukee Lincoln to be interviewed for the job, the first thing I saw was the wingtip floor shimes coming out, and I didn't know how they would fit in that Falcon, but apparently they did. And he made enough noise coming up the sidewalk and on the terrazzo floor out there with those wingtips that you always knew when Walt was around. But he came one Saturday for an interview. I think Duane Teska is really the one who hired him. I didn't hire him. A lot of people accuse me of a lot of things, hiring Walt Kroll and Don Soderberg. Well, they want to know why I went to prison. I'm doing reference. You know, foisting those people on the Diocese of La Crosse and the CWCC, you know, I have to do a lot of reparation for that. So 12 years now I've been down. Now Walt came in and we talked a little bit about Milwaukee Lincoln and his track team that was running in Monona Grove, I think, that week for the state track championship for the public schools that year. And we kind of looked over the facilities. He got his first look at the Dust Bowl, and then he asked me if we ever took film of our football games, and I said, yes, we film all of our games. And he said, how about giving me a couple of film, and I'll go back to Milwaukee and take a look at that, and then I would like to come back next Saturday for another interview. And so I said, fine, and we went down in the locker room, and we pulled out a film of a Campion game and an Aquinas game, too, Lee, one of yours. And I think a Regis game, and gave him those 3 film, and he went home to Milwaukee and came back the next week and walked into the office, and Jim Logan and I were doing the interviewing. 2 great sports, truly knowledgeable sports people, Jim and myself. And first thing Walt says to me is, I've been watching that film, and he says, who's that number 42 there? And I said, that's a kid by the name of Bobby Cook. And Walt says, what year is he? And I said, he was a sophomore last year. And so he said to me, well, who's that number 36 there? And I said, that's a kid by the name of Lloyd Hoffman. And Walt said, how old is he? And I said, he was a sophomore last year. And then he looked and he says, who's that number 60 there? And I said, that's a kid by the name of Snuffy. Do they still call you Snuffy? Yeah. Kid by the name of Snuffy Knauf. And he said, how old is he? And I said, he's a sophomore. Walt says, I think I can help you, Father. So I didn't hire Walt Kroll. Walt Kroll hired himself. I didn't even have a word to say about it. I don't think my name was ever on a contract, was it, Walt? I know, we didn't even have contracts in those days. We just shook hands and said, this is it, let's go to it, right? And then Don Soderberg came along a short while afterward. I don't know where we ever found Don. Don was hanging out in the gym at Auburndale, I think, in those days. But we've had some good times over the years and some good football, too. Walt and I used to go scouting with Walt, and I wasn't real sure why he wanted to take me scouting, because I couldn't tell an end around from, quarterback draw or whatever but we used to go from Milwaukee to Madison to Rockford. I can remember a place called Harlem on the north side of Rockford. You remember that one, Walt? God, that seemed to be forever and ever away from here. And of course, the deer like to run in this country, and Walt would be driving 80 miles an hour coming home from one of those scouting trips. And I said, Walt, slow down. You're just going to kill us both with those. And Walt said, I have a theory, Father. He said, if you drive fast enough, they always come out behind you. Somehow, some way, and I'm not sure about this at all, Walt tabbed me number one. I guess he gave nicknames to everybody. So pretty soon, the faculty caught on to this, and so I was being called number one by everybody. But lo and behold, the faculty got smart, as they're supposed to be. If they're going to teach the kids, they better know something, right? So they started calling Walt number two. Now, I have proof that I was number one because I have a football at home inscribed by the team of '67 that says 2 number 1 on it, from the Dons of '67, undefeated, 9-0, right? So I know I was number one because of that football, but I don't know about Walt being number two, especially if you knew the faculty at that time. We had some powerful people. We had little Sister Loretta teaching physics and chemistry and math. And we had Irene Specht, who was the secretary in the office, and now the toss-up really in terms of who was principal and who was number one would probably be between Irene and Sister Loretta. But one time, right out here in the foyer, there was Sister Loretta, Irene Specht, and Father Charlie Waljasper. And they got their heads together and having a real pow, and I come waltzing along, and I said, well, what's this high-level discussion all about? And Loretta, without blinking an eye, just looked right back at me, and she said, oh, this is just number 15, 16, and 17 having a little conference. I haven't been back to Columbus a whole lot. I stop in every now and then and I pay my respect, because you have to pay respect to principals, to Father Neis, to Bill. I bow nicely to him. And then I stop in to see Walt for a few moments and chat about the team a little bit. And I think the last official act that I performed here was actually in the fall of '67. I had left as principal that fall and had gone up to Wausau, kind of in exile, I guess, or a sabbatical or something is what I was doing. I'm not sure what I was doing. But anyway, I was there, and they invited me back to give a talk to the pep rally for the homecoming game before the Eau Claire Regis game. And that's really the last official act that I performed here at Columbus. They went on to win, of course they had to, because they were undefeated that year, 9-0. So they beat Regis that next day and became the CWCC. I felt it was all my talk at the pep rally. Now, Walt, I've truly enjoyed your friendship, and I get an awful lot of credit. I really look good when you hire a coach like that, so thank you very much, Walt.
Wanted to see if he's still awake. I did call my mom. She's back inside now, just a small case of frostbite. And you always need to have one of these hats around, folks, because she's all over in Green Bay today. 18-6 Packers. Where did I get this, huh? I brought it along with me. Now, I told you earlier I was very cruel at Gary Varsho Day to the mayor. Doubly cruel. So I'm going to be nice today. The mayor of Marshfield, Dave Koepke.
I just know he's going to want something. I'm going to lay awake night for the next week wondering just what the devil it is he's going to want. But he's going to have to do better than what he did the last time. Walt, on behalf of the citizens of Marshfield, I'd like to say thank you for the 25 years of service that you have given to Columbus High School, for the 25 years of influence that you've had on so many of the students. I look down there and I think of the Cox, the Seidels, the Fishers, the Webbers, the Connedys, the Shoyers the second time around, the Rays, the McCormicks. You've influenced those in some way or another, made better people out of them. You didn't stop there, Walt. You've influenced many of us, made better people of us through the examples you've set. Walt, we want to say thank you for all those things. Don't throw away that whistle yet. We still need you. And because of your influence you've had on so many of us for many years, is why I proclaim today Walt Kroll Day in the city of Marshfield. Whereas the city of Marshfield is proud to call Walt Kroll a citizen of this community, and whereas Walt Kroll has accumulated an impressive record of professional achievement in the world of high school sports, and whereas for the past 25 years, Walt Kroll has dedicated his entire being to the quest of success of building a winning team, and whereas Walt Kroll deserves commendation and recognition for his outstanding accomplishments, and we deeply appreciate the joy through sports that he's brought to us, our citizens. And whereas we salute you, Walt Kroll, for the tremendous success you've brought not only to Columbus High School, but to the young men you have coached and encouraged, for the many, many young lives you have touched. Now therefore I, David A. Koepke, Mayor of the City of Marshfield, do by proclaim December 11th in the year of the Lord 1988 to be Walt Kroll Day in the City of Marshfield, and do urge recognition of this outstanding man, coach, and educator. Signed this day, David A. Koepke, Mayor of the City of Marshfield.
When I retired from coaching 10 years ago, they named the garbage run after me. If you've ever been in Jack Hackman's office, folks, he's got little tricky signs all over the walls that say such clever things as these: early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and advertise. Never argue with a fool, people might not know the difference. And then my favorite one, the man who knows how will always have a job. the man who knows why will always be his boss. Now, he is my boss because I do work part-time at the radio station, as somebody made a comment before about that. So I'm very happy to have Jack here, not in that capacity, but in the capacity of representing Mackey. So right now, the president of Mackey, Jack Hackman.
We have living proof here this afternoon that man was born to suffer. Otherwise, why would we have to listen to Aslakson? He should be arrested for cruel and ridiculous haircuts. I'm going to talk a little bit about my association with Coach Kroll. When Coach came to Columbus, I was doing play-by-play for the radio station, and Coach really made my job a lot easier because Ron can tell you, and Gene, who's in the back taping this, can tell you, it's a lot more fun to broadcast games for a winning team. It's easier, and it's more enjoyable when you're ahead 40-7 than when you're losing 40-7. So Coach has had a lot of winning teams, winning games, and winning games are fun, and they're fun to broadcast, so he made my job easy in that light. On top of that, I was president of the Columbus High School Board for several years, and we had some trying times, and we had changes in administration. But Coach Kroll was always there, and I think he was kind of a solid rock for the school. He's given credit all the time for his outstanding football teams, his outstanding coaching ability, and rightfully so. He deserves that. But there are a lot of us who know that there was more to Coach Kroll at Columbus High School than just the teams he turned out. And I know during some of the difficult times, he was there, and he worked well with the faculty, with the administration, with the board, and certainly with the students. And he has a lot more to do with the success and the way the Columbus ship has kept sailing over the years than just turning out quality football players and quality men and women. And I thank him for that. He also helped make my job a lot easier when in that capacity. And those of us who know Coach Kroll know that there are many different aspects to him. And sometimes I think there's a special little fiendish blood that goes through his stream. He goes out looking to play the best teams around. He has traveled to Minnesota and to Iowa, and of course all around Wisconsin, playing the better ball clubs. And sometimes he may have gotten himself in a little deeper than he would have liked, but not very often, and he always dug himself out. But I think that's a trademark of the Columbus football team. They play the best and do the best. But Bob Stevenson alluded to one game that they played that I had kind of highlighted also as play-by-play for Columbus, because it's so much fun to broadcast a game where you have long runs. And in that game, Bobby Cuck had 6 runs and 1 called back. There was 1 short one, but there were an awful lot of long ones in that, and it was kind of exciting. But Coach Kroll, I think, laid awake nights wondering what team can he really pull a little surprise on? What team can we have some fun with? And he got the St. Paul Creighton team to come to Marshfield, Wisconsin. And they had won 10 consecutive conference championships. They had only lost 6 games in 10 years. And I'm sure as they pulled out of the
of the Twin Cities that day. They thought they were really coming to a picnic in Marshfield, Wisconsin, and they got a warm welcome. Coach Kroll had all the ants ready for them, and they really had a picnic. And that was the game Bob talked about, where they really blew Creighton out. And by the way, St. Paul Creighton that year, that was their first game too, went on and did not allow another touchdown to any conference game, in any conference game that year. So I think you can see how Coach Kroll has had some good surprises for some good football programs, and he certainly has had a fine one here. I also want to know that Coach Kroll has excelled in other things. He was the United Way Drive chairman not too long ago. In another light, we're always looking for good PR, and the chamber certainly, and the city of Marshfield, of course, has certainly received a lot of that good PR from Coach Kroll. He's taken his teams around the state and around the immediate Midwest area, and he's always had a quality type of a program, and when he goes to these towns, he always represented Marshfield well, and I'm sure Marshfield has gained a lot of good public relations and a lot of good PR comments from the way Coach Kroll has handled himself, and even more importantly, his team, how they have conducted themselves as they travel around the state. So we certainly want to chip in with Mackey's good wishes to 25 wonderful years of coaching, and we have a little item that we'd like to give to him at this time. It's a clock that has the Marshfield signature on it. It says, in recognition for 25 years of service to the community, Walt Kroll, December 11, 1988, Marshfield Area Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Coach Kroll, congratulations. Marilyn, just in case you're wondering, I've been here 27 years. The best part of this program, folks, seriously, is because Rozak is not up here. And I keep looking back at him, and all I can think of is, you know, if baloney were snow, he'd be a blizzard. It's all I can think of. I have not met Mr. Al Bill until this afternoon. I shouldn't be slamming anybody I don't know. I'll think about it. Al Bill is the executive director of WISAA. He came up this afternoon with Lee Gilbert from Aquinas. Lee knows the way very well. That's what Al said. And he's here on behalf of WISAA to speak. He's a little short, but that's okay too. He would fit in very well at both basketball programs at Marshfield and Columbus over the years. Mr. Al Bill.
I'm kind of glad I didn't meet Ron till today. Oh, beautiful. I will keep my comments short, but I must, Willie Wilcott, is that your correct name? Okay. Your name came up in the WISAA office one day because I was talking to my predecessor, Steve Pavella, and we were talking about making eligibility rulings, making rulings, different calls that come through the office. And I said to him one day, I said, Steve, I said, you know, what kind of calls do you get here into the WISAA office? What kind of things? Oh, he said, we get all kinds, Al. You can't believe it. I said, well, can you give me the strangest? He said, yeah, I did get a call from Walt Kroll one day. He said, and it was the typical call from Coach Kroll will come between 9 and 9:30 in the morning, and the phone rang. And Walt
said to me, Al, he said, we would like a ruling. And Steve said, sure, Walt, what can I help you with? He said, well, Steve, we had a boy get hit in the shot with a shot put in the head yesterday. And we'd like to know if WISA has any guidelines about that. And Steve, looking into his little green book, which he has right there, says, Walt, I'm sorry, that's not covered under track and field. Maybe you can find that in baseball, Walt says, where you're supposed to be catching the shot put when it comes toward you, Willie. So you were talked about definitely in the office. On behalf of the WISA Board of Control and our 59-member schools, it is my distinct pleasure to be here to celebrate with you and to share in this illustrious occasion. Back in 1977, Walt Kroll was honored as that year's WISA Man of the Year. In the announcement of Coach Kroll's selection, it was written, "He stands tall, not only in stature, but as a person as well. For he is not content to do only that which is expected of him. Rather, his magnanimity reaches out to all with whom he comes into contact. Fellow faculty, the students he instructs and coaches, fans, members of the community, contemporaries, and the association he so loyally serves. Not flamboyant, his warm personality captivates. Quietly, quickly, you like Walt Kroll. And so does WISA, as its Man of the Year of 1977, and now he's our Man of the Year for 25 years. It was further written, mark well the name of Walt Kroll, for he is certain to continue as one of the greatest influences on youth and football in years to come. WISA was justifiably proud to list him as their celebrated Man of the Year in 1977, and now, 12 years later, after 25 years of total dedication and involvement, we wish to say thank you. We love you, Coach. We have a couple of student and school-related awards. I'm going to call on Father Neis, principal of Columbus High School, and Andy O'Reilly, the president of the student council, to come up and make theirs now.
On behalf of the student body or rather the faculty and the staff of Columbus High School, we'd like to thank Walt Kroll for his 25 years here at Columbus, as everyone else has thanked him. As 6 years as an administrator, I've enjoyed working with Walt. Sometimes the athletic departments and administration don't get along very well together. Fortunately, here we've gotten along very well. He's been very supportive. I've never had any difficulties with the athletic department because he's an excellent athletic director as well as a good football coach. He sets a very good example for the students, and he makes my job a lot easier. Must have been easier being a principal, Father Kelly, when you were there. You have a lot less gray hair than I do right now. So I'd like to again congratulate Walt Kroll, and we'd like to make a presentation on behalf of the faculty and administration to Walt.
Coach, Coach, you have touched us with your great knowledge that you have handed down, and we thank you for all the things you have done, because good things are hard to find. You not only have made a winning team on the football field, but with all of us. And on behalf of the student body, we would like to give you a certificate and a warm thank you as a token of our appreciation.
And then we have the two second-generation football players who are going to make a presentation, Jason Maurer and Paul Wilcott.
Coach, for all of your work and dedication the past 25 years, but most of all, for putting up with everyone up here talking to you. On behalf of the athletes, students, fans, and supporters, I give you this plaque. It reads, Coach Kroll, an appreciation for 25 years of coaching. Columbus alumni, fans, and players, 1988.
Coach, this trophy is given by the class of 1972, which reads 25th anniversary of Columbus. Thanks for all the memories. Walt, you'll always be a part of us, class of 1972.
I have a memory of a Columbus football game that the Dons won. Walt Kroll broke his wrist sometime during the first half by stepping in a drain that was somewhere around the Columbus bench. And I don't think anybody knew about it, except I kind of sensed it because I looked down there and he had a program wrapped around his wrist, a solid program just like this. I thought, my goodness, what's he got? Well, talked to him at halftime. He's okay. Well, after the ball game, went to the hospital, and he had a broken wrist. But there he was for 3 quarters. Felt like this is really going to help a whole lot. We used to go out after most games and, celebrate having a can of barley pop or two. We only had to have a couple that night because he had enough antibiotics and so on in him to bang. It's almost unbelievable to hear that Walt Kroll is coaching basketball. Now, I still can't believe that today. I mean, Walt Kroll is to basketball as Yasser Arafat is to headgear, I would think. A lot of people talk about him being committed, and I'm a little bit nervous about, Don talking about Norwood and Father Kelly here from Oxford. I'm not sure what they're talking about. We don't want him to retire, but he did tell me once that when he does retire, he's going to tuck a football under his arm and start heading south. And he's going to get into Mexico, and the further south he goes, he's going to stop and finally somebody says, hey, what's that under your arm? That's where he's going to retire. Now it's time to hear from the guest of honor. You don't have to say much. All I have to do is say one word. Coach.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm really overwhelmed and real nervous right now. When Danny told me about the program, he came into the study hall that I was supervising, and he just said, Coach, mark down December 11th on your calendar.
be there in the gym at 2 o'clock, and kind of left it at that, and hadn't said much after that until just a day or so ago. So I really, to see all you wonderful people out there really gets to me. This morning I spoke to a Holy Name Society group at St. John's, and there was a small group there, and I was very, very nervous at that time, just with a small group. So I got a few things I want to say though. I got zinged pretty good here. And Danny, I remember in high school I always used to call Danny Hobo, and I still do to this day. And Danny was one of the good halfbacks we had during the period that he was in high school, and he was had a lot of speed, and a lot of times we were able to break him loose for long runs. And I vividly recall one game when we were playing at Stevens Point against Pacelli, and we were down about our 10-yard line, I think it was, and Danny ran a sweep play, and he broke out in the open, and Pacelli didn't have anybody that was fast enough to catch him, and he got up to the 40 and then the 50 and the 40 and the 30 and the 20, and he was running scot-free down the sidelines. And finally he got inside to the 10-yard line. He had about 3 more steps to go before he had himself a touchdown of 6 points. And at that point, the gas tank ran dry, and he fell right flat in his face, about on the 3-yard line. Also, I remember Danny played on an unbeaten team there for us, and the next year he'd been involved in flying all through high school, and the next year we were invited over to Green Bay to observe the Packers practice and to have a buffet lunch there. And so Danny was going to be one of the pilots. We took 2 aircraft over, loaded up our team, and we took 2 aircraft over. And Dan was one of the pilots. And Coach Soderberg was with me at that time, and he kept on asking me, Coach, he said, a hobo driving that airplane, are you sure? He said, is this for real? and Don, that was his debut at flying. And we got on the plane, and he sat next to me, and it was white knuckle time. It was like that, all the way over and all the way back. He didn't take a breath hardly. But we had a real good time that day at practice and our lunch and what have you. And that was one of the great times I can remember with Danny and also Coach Soderberg. Ron, Mr. A, you and I have been great friends, certainly for 25 years, except for those 3 years when you quit talking to me there. But and then I like to think, after all I've done for you, 25 years I let you run the clock at Beale Stadium at our game. For 25 years. Also, for 15 years, I let him run the book here at our basketball games. The one game we were playing Menominee, Michigan, and on the opening kickoff, the ball, this was when Columbus's senior high's side was on the opposite side of what it is now. And on the opposite side there, there's a drain right where the players and coaches stand. And the play came over toward the sideline, and I stepped back. It looked like it was going to come right into the sideline. I stepped back, and I stepped down that drain. I lost my balance and sat down my rear end and put my hand down to break the fall. And when I got up, I could feel some tingling in my hand, in my fingers.
And I looked, and my arm was like, there was some funny crinks in my arm. So that's when Dr. Haight, that was on the opening kickoff, Dr. Haight put that program around my arm and wrapped a little tape around it. And then after the game, I let you take me up to the hospital, for Pete's sakes. And also, about that time, the Adidas Shoe Company came into existence and put his shoes on the market. And I was in Green Bay one day, and I stopped at a shoe store, and I bought a pair of the brand new Adidas. And they didn't have any blue and white ones. They had orange and black though. So I wanted to pay respects to senior high too. So I bought a pair of the nice brand new orange and black Adidas shoes. And the first time he saw me with those shoes, oh boy, he just went crazy. I mean, and he pestered me and bugged me so much, I finally took them off my feet and said, "Here, take the damn things." So, you got no business singing me like that, eh? Tom Knauf. Tom was one of my best players. He was a very fiery and competitive type of player, and I'm really proud of the success he's had at Stratford as their football coach. And as a junior, Tom got a concussion, and we just got some brand new helmets that year. They were dark blue, and I was a great Notre Dame fan, still am. And if you can think back that far, some of you, that year Notre Dame came out with that blue helmet and a gold shamrock on the side. So that's the kind of helmets we got. And Tom got a concussion there, and he wasn't supposed to play the next day, and he missed one day of practice, and the next day his dad came and said, "Coach, he can play. It's okay to put him in there." So at any rate, after the season ended, Tom's dad came up again, and he said, "Coach, I don't like those helmets you got." I said, "But Fred, we just got the darn things this year. They're brand new." He said, "Yeah, but they're blue and they should be white." So he said, "Can you get some other ones?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And he said, "Well, how many do you need?" I said, "Well, we probably need about 44 helmets." He said, "Good, just order them and give me the bill." So Tom's dad bought us 44 brand new helmets at the time. Then Tom got a scholarship to University of South Dakota and went out there with Bobby Koepke, and he got a concussion out there also. And that ended his coaching or his active playing career. And at Stratford, I understand he has a reputation of being rather excitable at times, and been known to scream and yell and stomp his feet and that type of thing. And every once in a while, the athletic director there, Bob Delaney, will call me up, and he always balls me out. He said, "God darn it, Kroll, that crazy Knauf's acting up again, and I blame it all on you." I always say, "Bob, it's that concussion acting up again." Mr. Soderberg, Don Soderberg. I knew Don was from Thorpe. He was at Auburndale, had just started in the teaching and coaching business a short time before that, and he was over at Auburndale, and we needed a basketball coach. And I knew he was from Thorpe, so I talked to him, and Thorpe had a real good coach at that time, and I thought maybe the guy had influenced Don a little bit. And so I talked to him and brought him over here, and he was interviewed, and we hired him. And right before basketball was going to start, Don was involved in City League play. And of course, guys get on in years, they always think they've got one more good year left, you know. And he was a little hefty at the time. And Anyway, in the game right before the season started, he tore his Achilles tendon, and he ended up in the hospital, and he was in a cast from his toes up to his hip, and he had to stay there a couple weeks. So our season started, and the first 3 games we lost. And then finally, Don got out of the hospital and got back here to coaching. And I can say that he kept our perfect record up, because he lost the next 18 straight in a row, and we ended up 0-21. Okay. So also the last 2 years, Pacelli's beaten us in football, but for 6 consecutive years prior to that, we'd won the game. And we really had some good games over the years, some good exciting games with each other. And I think 3 years ago, when we won the game, the coaches generally share a welcome at the end of the game, shake hands and greet each other, and it's just like the players do. So this was taking place, and Don was kind of standing on the periphery there, and he was kind of biting his lip, and he was scowling and everything, because he does not take well to defeat, as we all know. And I kind of glanced up. I was looking for him, wanted to shake hands with him, but he never came around. Finally, I saw his dad, Pat, and Pat said, "You get over there right now and shake hands with Walt." Father Kelly, of course, Father Kelly is guilty of hiring me. He can't deny that. And we immediately became great friends. And Father and I really have shared a lot of great moments together. And we both like sports, and we both enjoy ourselves. And shortly after I came here, we were kind of, as Father said, we were going all over the place, scouting games and attending games that where we really weren't involved. And Father Kelly went to the first Super Bowl, I remember, and that type of thing. And we were really having a good time. And I think I myself was going to Atlantic City and going to football clinics and going to Chicago and New York City and Los Angeles for football meetings, and we were really enjoying ourselves. And it soon became evident, I think, to the powers that be that the city wasn't big enough for both of us. So you all know how much the Columbus football fans love their football, right? Okay, so the powers that be, they only had one choice. They fired Father Kelly and they kept me. I just want to say a few more words, folks. Looking out into the audience, I see a lot of the fellows that I worked 4 years with, and it's really gratifying to see them here. I see John Baltus is here, and John, when John was a player for me, John was the captain of the defensive unit that used to line up in the defense that our opponents that we were playing against that week. He and his teammates would always be the defensive team, the scout team. So that's kind of a thankless job at times. And this one day I called John and his teammates into the office away from the regular offensive team. And I said, John, we're going to be playing Campion this week down at Prairie du Chien, and things are kind of dragging. I'm a little worried. I said, let's have a little fun at practice tonight. And I said, I'll start scolding you guys about halfway through the practice, and then I'll say, God darn it, don't you guys want to go to the game Saturday? If you don't start shaping up, I'm not going to take any of you guys. And then I said, don't you want to go to the game? And I said, when I say that, you guys respond by saying, hell no, and then make a beeline up the hill up toward the locker room. So anyway, that moment came, and that's what happened. And I remember Steve Burr was one of the best players we ever had, and Steve always used to stand, he would stand by me when it wasn't his turn to carry the ball, and he'd always stand there with his legs crossed and one hand holding a shoulder pad like this. And Steve was a very quiet, reserved type of guy, and anyway, when I said that, John and his pals made a beeline for the hill, and Steve Burr was standing right by me, and I kind of glanced at him. His mouth just dropped when they said hell no. But the real irony of the whole thing was one of the members of John's team was not there. John's team was referred to as the Tire Treads. They had their own personal jerseys and everything. And his name was Frankie Stauber. And Frankie wasn't there because he had DTs that afternoon. But he came out to practice, and he'd missed that little get-together downstairs in the locker room. So when I asked that question, don't you guys want to go Saturday, and they responded like that, and they all took off, well, Frankie didn't know anything about it. So he took off a lot faster than any of the other guys. Yeah, he made a beeline for the locker room, and we couldn't get him out of the locker room. Okay. I see John's dad, Vern, sitting in the audience too. And there was a time when Vern and I were real good friends. That was just till recently. And every time I stopped in down the station there, he always says, geez, Kroll, for crying out loud, I'm getting so sick and tired of picking up that paper and seeing your mug in there, or how great you are and all that kind of stuff. Or if I go home at supper time and turn Channel 7 on, there it is again. Said, I can't take much more of this. And he said, by the way, that last article that said you were an institution here at Columbus, he said, did that say institution or that you should be in an institution? Bob Olson from Assumption, who was formerly here, and he was supposed to be here with Vern today. Bob has been a real close friend as well. He was the athletic director when I came here, and he and Father Kelly talked to me and all that stuff. But over the years, Bob and I used to go to athletic director meetings in, like, for example, Toma or lacrosse. If we'd go, I'd meet him in Babcock, pick him up there, and then we'd ride together. And this one day, we drove to Toma. The meeting was at the Holiday Inn. We drove to Toma, and there's a real good truck stop there. So we pulled in down there to have breakfast. And Bob is completely different from me as you possibly can be. He's a bundle of energy and nerves, and he's always on the go. He can't sit still for 5 seconds. We were having breakfast there, and Bob was he was flirting with the waitress for one thing, and every 2 minutes he was getting up. He had to make a telephone call to this person or that person, and I was looking at the paper. He'd take the paper, he'd want to look at it, and he was just making a nervous wreck out of me. And that's the way Bob always is. And so anyway, we finally got done. I said, Bob, I can't take it anymore. Let's get out of here. So we finally got done and got squared up, and we got in the car, and he just kept on like that. And I happened to glance at the gas gauge, and I saw I needed gas. So he had me so nervous at that time. We pulled up to the pumps there, the truck stop, and I pulled up, and I said, Bob, will you knock it off and try to relax or something? I was looking at him, and the attendant came to the window, and I kind of glanced like this and kind of frightened me it shocked me for a moment, and I rolled the window down real quick, and I was so worked up and everything with Bob that I said, fill it up with Miller Lite and check the oil. I see, I was waiting for this, believe me. I see, as I said, I see so many of the fellows that played for me out there, and it's really gratifying to see them all. And all of you people, I just feel so happy that everybody's here, that you could take the time to be here with me today, and I'm very, very appreciative that all you people are here. I don't know, I just don't know what to say much in that respect. I see Willie Wilcott, and I'm working with his son, PJ, now, and I remember Willie, I think Willie and Terry Mansell, who's sitting right back there. If I had to pick two players that I've worked with in the last 25 years, they were the two guys that loved football more than anybody else, I think. They just loved every moment of it, the grime and the dirt and the scratches and the bumps and the dust and everything else. They loved it. And when Willie was a senior, he just worked so hard getting himself ready for his senior year, and he was looking so forward to it. And one of the biggest disappointments in the last 25 years that I've had was in our first game, we were playing a team from the Metro Conference in Milwaukee, and we were just bowling over them. We were butchering them, and Willie was playing fullback that night, and I still got it on film. He carried the ball off tackle, and one of the Milwaukee players put his helmet right on his arm and busted it in 3 places, and that was it for Willie for the rest of the year in the first game. So that just made me sick. Terry Mansell sitting up there was a great player for us, and I'd like to describe an incident that I experienced with Terry. We had a game on Friday night, and the next morning I was home, and Terry's mother, Gertie, who many of you know, and I just love Gertie, she came to the door and was pounding on my door, and I opened the door and she said, Coach, hurry up. Terry's down at the clinic and they're trying to put a cast on his hand. And so I said, okay, Gert, let's go. And that was when the clinic was down on South Central there, and the doctor Terry had, with no offense to any doctors here tonight, was a doctor that kind of had a reputation of slapping a cast on you. If you coughed hard, you might get a cast put on you. And so Gertie and I, we sped down there and we jumped in the elevator and went up, and we got in the doctor's office there, and it was just like the cat that ate the mouse. The doctor came out and he was going like this, and he said, well, that's it, Mrs. Mansell. And Terry was sitting there, he was just crying his eyes out, and he had this big cast on his hand. And so Monday rolled around, we started getting ready for our next game, and Terry was out in the field, and he was really feeling sorry for himself, and whining and complaining and everything that he couldn't play. And the next day, I had him in study hall, and he was whining and crying. and he was driving me crazy. And so I said, Terry, look, come on with me. So we went from the study hall down to the art room, and I had the key to get in. And I walked in, I looked around, and I said, I wonder where the hacksaws are. I finally found a hacksaw, and I said, Terry, put your arm down here. Put his arm down like that. I got the hacksaw, back and forth, and sawed the cast right off. Now, Terry, is that a true story or isn't it? Right. I just want to say one more thing. I see Bob there, Bob Rose, who is one of our great linemen, one of the best linemen we ever had. And Bob's in Wisconsin Rapids now. And Bob and his wife Sherry and his son are there. And Bob was a great competitor for us, and he really was respected around the league and around central Wisconsin. And Don touched on it about the Dust Bowl. But this one day, it was so hot out there you couldn't believe it. It was in the high 90s, and it was just, the dust was like that. It was like an inch deep. And every time we would run a play, the dust would just swirl, and the players would have to stop, before they could huddle up to kind of locate themselves and locate where the center was. And everybody was frustrated, and I think the most frustrated guy was Bob, because he was screwing up just as bad as the other guys, if not worse. And they were sweating, and you could see the dust in their nostrils and in their eyes and in their mouth, and it was just terrible. And so finally we came up to the line there one time, and I was with the defense, and Coach Soderberg was with the offense. And Bob said, he said it like this. He said, "Don't you guys want to win? Don't you guys want to win?" And he was pounding his chest. So, okay, you've been here a long time, folks, and again, thanks a lot for everything. And I'll just complete it by saying this. I cut this out of the USA Today. It was on the front page, and it was a man talking about his work. And this is the way I feel about my work. I do what I love for a living, and not many people can say that. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks. Refreshments in the cafeteria? Refreshments in the cafeteria, people. So let's enjoy ourselves. Congratulations.